Okay, we are back. Just a minute. I mean, I'm being a good boy today. I'm not really saying. Yeah, sorry about the break. Yeah, so you were telling us something about
Oh
fire.
yeah. I was saying, I'm like, life now starts to beat the shit out of you, right? And this level that is your normal, right, has to come
Yeah,
down here. Do you understand? Because now it's not just okay, I'm existing at a certain level of performance, right? And again, when it comes to like us that are like fitness trainers and are not just that are that this is like your lifestyle, it's not just what you do, this is how you live, right? It can become very daunting, right? Because you can't exactly exist the way that you're used to existing, and you have to find a new normal. Yeah. And I think that the transition between what you're used to and finding a new normal is where like all of my mental strength was tried. Do you understand? Because I mean, let's go on to, I'm used to performing at a certain level, right? Being able to run like a a kilometer in like certain amount of time, being able to squat like some like a certain kind of weight that is comfortable and like it's heavy, but like it's not heavy to you because you've been doing this for a while. And
yeah,
then having to like go from that, literally I went from that to I couldn't even work out more than twice a week at some point, right? Because I was on like really like strong hormonal meds, and the hormonal meds that I was taking, like I remember my doctor telling me that, look, there are going to be side effects of this medication, right? And everybody's side effects are different. Do you understand? But like he's like, one of the things that you may experience is tiredness, right? Because of what I was going through. I I mean, we've had this conversation, you and I have had conversation about me sleeping like for many years.
yeah,
But we all know that my sleep is rubbish. And then imagine like going from my sleep being rubbish to barely sleeping. Like I remember like my flatmate would she would sleep and wake up and meet me awake. And at some point, it was so bad that I had to now start lying that, oh no, I just woke up, just so that she would not like give me a hard time that I've been awake for like hours, like on end. And so I couldn't sleep. Like it was so bad, I could not sleep. And I was probably getting like 2 hours sleep at most. Some days when I'm lucky, it's 3 hours. So the hormonal meds, one of the things I did was, because when I got to the hospital finally, he was like, "Oh, that part of why my insomnia has gotten this bad is what's going on with my hormones, and that the meds are going to make me sleep." And so I might notice that I start to get tired like more than usual, right? And I was tired to the point that I could only muster the energy to go to the gym twice in a week. And those twice in a week, I'm not now going there to now go and lift what I'm used to lifting. Are you trying to die? You want to die? So I'm going there, and then I have to do what it is that is not too intense and that is comfortable enough for me to still be able to go home and not feel like I'm going to pass out. Do you get? I was tired all
yeah.
the time. Like even if I'm awake in the morning, once I hit a certain like time during the day, yeah, I'm gonna need to sleep. Like I think it was around like when it hit like maybe 12 or 1, I needed to not be awake. Like that's how tired I was. Like I was I would be struggling to keep my eyes open. So I would have to go home and actually like sleep before I now got up and then went back for like maybe my evening sessions. And it's that thing where you can't exactly stop your life. So you can't stop taking on sessions because that's what you do. Do you understand? So you're
Mm-hmm.
still having to show up for sessions. And typically, like I typically go for sessions, I'll probably work out with my clients. But I had to stop because I didn't have the energy to do that anymore. Do you understand?
Yeah,
And so it was struggling with that, struggling with the fact that my new reality is that I can't work out as much. In this time, I'm still dealing with ulcer, and then I'm still dealing with what's going on with me, and I'm on hormonal meds. So yeah, trying to change how, like, I have to now change like a couple of things about the way that I eat because I have ulcer. And then is and when you first like get diagnosed with ulcer, is that thing where you can't not eat
But you have to
and you
eat.
cannot not exactly. Do you understand? Because if you don't eat, you get bloated. If you eat, if you eat too late, you get like it's a total madness. Do you understand? Around that time, I now got COVID, and I'm just like,
So it's
yeah,
back to
this
back.
year cannot get any. Just like maybe let me just pass and die. Do you understand? So there's all of the things that's going on. Can you hear me?
Clearly, yes. Now I can't. Ah, mention of COVID. Okay, her network is bad, and I think I know why. But let's wait for her to get back in. Yeah, she's in. Great. Yeah, welcome back. Uh, okay, still loading.
Hi, sorry.
Right.
Can you hear me now?
At the mention of anything with Eid these days, I mean, things start happening. I don't understand. I thought we've passed this phase. Please. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
I'm trying to see if I can set up in a different place so that
Okay.
my network
Network is
will cooperate with me. Okay. All right, yeah. So, can you hear me?
yes, clearly.
All right, what
I
was I
think you're
saying?
okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
So,
you
I'm
were
dealing with
mentioning.
that. And then in the middle of all of that, and now I get COVID, right?
Yeah.
So, I can't now, I can't go to work. I have to be in isolation. And I can't go work out either. So I'm still dealing with that. And then I'm having to deal with ulcer and then still be on the hormonal meds I'm taking. So the side effects of like the hormonal meds was me, I was asleep a lot. I was tired a lot. I could barely do anything. And then there's COVID. And thankfully, I mean, because of my lifestyle, I didn't get COVID as bad as like I was supposed to, right? But
Yeah.
then I did notice that, and that's another thing that I don't think that I mean I started to go online and do like a lot of research, but I did notice that my lungs took a beating, right? So your performance levels, like even like I was struggling already because of like the meds I was on. COVID now, like I'm probably here at that point, and then COVID just goes, yeah, no. So now,
Interesting.
and then the crazy thing that was happening in that time is, so before I even had gone to the hospital and like dealt with the hormonal issues I had, I was gaining weight, right? And I remember like my doctor saying that, oh, that the weight gain was coming from the hormonal imbalance because I don't like, for months I was ignored. Like the first hospital I went to, I was ignored. And I'm like, something is wrong, right? Because nothing about my lifestyle has changed in like 8 years. Like I'm literally probably more active than I've ever even been, right? I'm like, so there's, it doesn't even make scientific sense that I'm gaining weight. It's not possible. I'm like, for somebody to be gaining weight in a calorie deficit, that's it, that's an issue. Do you understand?
Sure.
And I remember my first doctor telling me, yeah, you know, women, you guys just exaggerate a lot. It's not that serious. I'm like, Baba, I'm telling you that there's something wrong, okay? And then so I mean, obviously he didn't listen, so I left. It was months after. I mean, I went from being like a 70 something and then noticing that my clothes were not fitting. I'm just like, excuse me, hello. And then I had one of the times where I had to go to the hospital. I think this was when I was on admission or something. I had gone to the hospital and they had to check my weight, and then I was 86 or something, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, in how many months I've gained 10 kg and I've done absolutely nothing different. It's not like I eat more. I was most probably eating less because of all the pain that I was in, because I didn't know that I had ulcer at that time. I'm like, so it's not making the math is not mathing really. And then eventually that's when I found, like, the second hospital where I found my gynae, and they did like a bunch of tests. I was going back and forth in hospitals for like at least 3 weeks just to get like all of the tests I needed to get done. And then that's when they found what the problem was. And I had to see the gynae, and it was like, oh, that this is why you're gaining weight. It's not anything that you're doing. And so fast forward to like taking the meds, coming out of like having COVID, going to the place where the ulcer is now sort of managed, and then coming out of being on hormonal meds for like months, really. I'd gone back and had a sit down with my doctor, and I'm like, okay, so all this weight I've gained now, what are we gonna do? because because yeah, no, this is not for me. This is not my normal. And he literally sits me down and he goes, first of all, you're going to have to ease back into your lifestyle. You can't just up and then go back immediately with the amount of intensity I used to, because if you do that, you might disrupt your hormones again. He's like, so you have to go to the place where you're easing back into it and understanding how to take more rest days than you're used to. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I'm waiting for you to answer the question, where is this weight going to come off? And he's like, oh yeah, it will. I'm like, time frame. He's like, 1 year. I'm like, sorry? Excuse me? He's like, I don't want to lie to you, okay? He's like, 1 year is a good time frame. And I'm like, is there a reason why? He's like, first of all, you have to understand that your body is changing. That's one. Two, you just came off hormonal meds, and those are basically steroids, right? And your system has to first of all flush it out. And that's going to take like a few months first. And then after that, while you're getting back to like having like a regular routine and like getting back to what your life is normally used to, you have to understand that your body is not a machine, right? So there are processes to it, and it's like getting back to normal and knowing that, oh, okay, this is good for me instead of bad. You have to actually understand that if you don't give yourself time, you would probably end up frustrated. I'm like, and you don't think I'm frustrated right now? That's fine. And he's like, so yeah, that's the realistic timeline I can give you, and maybe just expect like a couple of months after that. I'm like, word. And I'm like, all right, cool, no wahala. I mean, I would try. So it's that thing of now coming to the place where, okay, you're finally in a place where you can have some semblance of what is normal to you, right? But normal doesn't look like normal used to look. Do you understand?
Sure.
And there are days where, I mean, I've gone into my closet and I'm probably trying to find something to wear, and I put on a dress and I literally just break down in tears, and I bawl my eyes out, like, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going again. So I think for me, like, it's that thing of like understanding how, and because I also have like a sort of like I'm sort of obsessive. Like, I have like an obsessive like mind. So if I pick something, I'm gonna do this thing. I will not stop. I will obsess over it till I get what I want to do. Do you understand? And so I think that most of the time that has always been a good thing when it comes to like what I do, my fitness, my career, and all of that. But then it becomes a bad thing when you are now struggling with this level of struggle,
And you
right?
have no control.
And exactly. And you've lost every form of control. Your obsession cannot now be the thing that climbs you out of this hole, right? Now you now have to understand that patience is a thing that needs to happen, right? And so I think one day I was really frustrated, and then I reached out to a coach. So I'd met her at the studio that I like, at Body Rocks that I go to. And she's one of those people that I really respect because she knows her stuff, right? So I reached out to her and told her that I need help, right? And it's mostly help of I need somebody to remind me like why I do what I do, and I need somebody to remind me that like this is like something that takes time because I think I've forgotten because I've existed in a level that is higher than this for a very long time, right? So I'm now struggling coming back. I'm basically like at the beginner level again. Do you understand? I'm like, so I'm now struggling because I need somebody to remind me that I'm not losing my mind. Do you get? So I reached out to her and she's like, oh, that okay, let's set up a meeting and I should meet her. And so I did that and I went to see her and we had like a really long conversation where we talked about nutrition. We talked about like adjusting my calories and all of that. And we had to write down set goals and stuff like that I needed to achieve and track it like month for month. And I think that helped me like just go back to a mental place where I know that I've always chosen the long game when it comes to fitness, like every single time. Like it's always been about the long term outcome, right? And maybe because I'd gotten to where I was, I began to forget that that's always what has kept me here. Do you understand? Especially because I'm now in a place where I'm existing in a body that I did not intentionally try to get. I think that's the hardest thing when you now land in a body that you do not go and look for. It came to look for you, right? And you have absolutely no control as to how you got here, Jonathan, because getting here was necessary for my health. Do you get? And I think that for me, that has been like the place where I've had to consistently remind myself in the last couple of months that this was good for me, right? And even though I don't consider it good because I mean obviously it has affected my performance. I'm not as fast. Um I'm obviously not as strong. I think it's just in the last maybe 2 months that I've like taken the time after seeing my coach to be able to build that back up. And I'm still not even where I used to be, but at least it's much because when I came back from all of this and trying to get like into a routine this year, I think that was around when I made that post. I think I'd gone to run like I went to run like my first run in months, and literally I finished running 1 kilometer in like 12 minutes. I'm like, excuse me, what? Hello, hello. And then I think that's when I realized like even though I didn't have COVID that bad, that's when I realized how much of a hit that my lungs have taken because that was the hardest run I've run in my entire life. Like it was so bloody hard. I felt like I was going to die. Like I couldn't breathe. And I'm just like, what the hell? Like it was so bad that even climbing stairs, like I would climb a flight of stairs, get to the top, I'm like, oh, wow. And so coming from where you're before you be running upstairs and as if it's nothing, and then climbing flight of stairs now and like you can barely catch your breath. It's a what's the word? Like reality actually just dawns on you in that moment. Do you understand?
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, answer your question. It's been hard. It's been very hard.
Man, thank you for sharing. I mean, I know you don't talk much. Maybe I have this magic that made you share this, but actually, there's really a lot to unpack in this story. I mean, most of the time, I don't even remember why I started conversations like this, and I hear certain things just come off of their own life. It's unplanned, it's unscripted, and it really triggers a lot of things. I mean, you've said really, really very profound things, but one of them I really pick up is that I was having a conversation with someone like this on flow. I mean, we when we look at flow, sometimes you look at it into just one domain, and we don't see how it applies in our lives. In this case, I was using the flow chart in place of happiness, how we pick happiness, and then this is entirely like new, and somehow in my head it's still applying. Flow is mostly like it goes up, comes down, and every time we reach a certain peak, if we stay there for a long time on a plateau, it becomes our new low. So by the time, if anything happens after we peak again, we go back to what used to be our new low. And I mean, I was hearing that in this because I know where you, or at least I recollect where you come from, most of your throwbacks into that peak performance that you know. And I mean, even at your new low where you were, it was more like it's still a high. But that reality of, I mean, this is not who I am, and this is not, let me use happiness because it's what a lot of us look at. This is not my state of happiness. I know I'm unhappy, but even on that state of unhappiness, I think I was plotting a chart on progress some days ago, and it's even at this new low of this regress, it's still where I used to be on progress before, because it's not going back all the way. But then you said there's something really, really, I mean, thoughtful, and sometimes forget where we started, we forget the long term, we want that quick results, and this applies to a lot of people in beginning of fitness, happiness, progress, whatever. And then the key thing I think I picked out was you had to seek help. You know, a lot of times when I tell people that, look, even people who train other people actually pay for other people to train them. It's not because we look at ourselves as less, but sometimes you understand that we've come to a place of low vibration, lower fitness, and someone just needs to like draw you up there. It's not because they have the full, they have the strength you have or that tenacity you have, but for some reason they've come to an experience which you've not even come to at all. And I mean, it's very interesting that you were able to share this on a live video, and I hope a lot of us picked something from it. So I think the next place that I want to key into is, I mean, people were observing, the spectators now, you know, they were seeing these changes happening, and certainly questions were asked. So I think where I want to like draw you into is like what was the what was like the general comments when these things were going on, and how did it come across to you when people were asking what's going on, I mean, or asking the wrong questions?
Yeah, I think for me, like, if I even got questions, I think if I'd even gotten questions, like it'd make more sense. Do you understand? Like if somebody walks up to me and be like, oh wow, it's been a while, like we've seen you and stuff. What's going on? Are you okay? Do you understand me? I can count on one hand how many people did that. Like I can count it. Do you get in the last like almost a year, to be honest, because I mean we're in May now. So this thing started last year around this time. I can count on one hand how many people actually came up to me and asked me like, "Are you okay? What's going on? And are you fine? I haven't seen you in a while." Because I mean, I disappeared from a lot of my regular places that I would typically go to. Do you get? So it was, if I wasn't at home, I was probably in a client's house. If I wasn't in a client's house, I was home. Do you understand? So it was more of, you get weight, oh. I thought they used to train people. Like it's always that. Do you understand? Like it's never, oh, are you okay? Did something happen? Are you struggling with? I mean, and that's, I think that for me, being in this place that I am and that I was for, like being in like a mental low and then being like where I am now, which is like kind of here, right? I think that one of the things that I've learned is that, first of all, people project a lot, right?
I mean,
People project a shitload.
All
like
these assumed things.
People project a lot, right? And the people who genuinely care if something was really wrong with you, there are not many. Do you understand me? And I remember telling like a friend of mine, I'm like, do you know like what's mad to me is that people walking up to me are having this comment like, what if I actually fell into like deep state depression? Like what if that's really what happened? And I haven't left my house in months or posted anything because I literally was like in a very like dark place. I'm like, do you know how like unnecessary these comments are? Like, you don't have to say anything. Do you understand? And I think for the last almost 1 year, which is like when I made that post that said like when you messaged me, for the last 1 year, I've not had any comments. Like I've never like responded because I mean, the typical me, I'm not the person who's going to come for you. Do you understand? Like I don't do that. Oh, you say I'm gonna come for you. Like I'm not. What's the word? I don't do that. That's just not me, right? And maybe it was me when I was younger, but it's not who I am in the last couple of years. And so the tendency for me to walk away when something is said to me that I don't like is much higher than the tendency for me to respond. Especially
Okay.
when I can't respond from a place of being kind. Do you get?
Or
I will leave it
indifferent.
alone. Exactly. So I've I've mostly ignored it for 1 year. And I think that day, like I think a few days before I made that post, I just woken up one day, and I think it's because I spoken to my coach was talking to me about something, and I just woken up one day, and I'm like, I'm actually alive. Like all of the things that happened to me like last year, I'm actually alive. Like I'm taking a beating in every form, right? Especially physically, like the amount of things I've struggled with health wise, and I'm alive. Like I can wake up, I can use my two legs. It's been a very long time since I had to go to the hospital and be on admission. There was a night where I was in so much pain. They gave me painkillers that I was hallucinating. But I was in the pain that I was in. If they hadn't given me those painkillers, I'm not really sure what would have happened. Do you understand? And I like play all of that back, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm actually just grateful that I can breathe, and I don't need help to do that. And so I think after
Yeah.
that was when, like a few days later, someone sees me, and this one was very weird because so I'm walking into I was going into Body Rocks, and someone sees me that I don't even know and goes, "Oh, I thought that was you. Oh, hi, long time." I'm like, "Okay, hi." And I'm still waiting. Okay, maybe introduce yourself. Like, how do I know? Oh, you don't know me. I'm like, oh, okay. She's like, yeah, I just think that you look bigger than you used to be. And I'm there and I'm still waiting because what's the point of this? Like, I want you to finish your train of thought. I mean, and then she keeps going on, and I'm like, all right, thanks. And then I walk away. And I go upstairs, right? And I'm still heading into Body Rocks. And I've avoided that one. I mean, of course, I wanted to say something, but again, there was no kindness in anything I was going to respond. So I'm like, yeah, let's not do this. Because if I was to respond, I don't, she will have a really bad day. So I walk away from it and I go upstairs. And then this one, is somebody who I used to see like a lot, right? And every time I saw her, like, because she owned a shop, so every time I saw her, like, I would greet her, ask her how she was doing and stuff like that. And then she sees me and goes, like, I'm passing. I think I had like AirPods in my ear or something, and she goes, "Ah, wow, you gain weight, oh." And I don't respond, and I now turn off, like, I turned down the volume, that, and like so I could hear what she was saying. And she keeps on saying it, and I still don't respond, and I'm walking away. And then she comes and she goes, "Hey, I'm talking to you," and then she taps me.
Wicked laughter.
Oh my god! And then I now take out the AirPods and I'm looking at her, and she's like, and she was talking to me now. And when she finished, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that I have a mirror. Do you understand? I'm like, I'm sure that's where I came from. Like when I got up from I'm sure that the house I came from, there's a mirror there. Honestly, like just off the top of my head, I think there's a mirror in my house. I'm like, so maybe next time, just mind your business or don't. I mean, either of them. Do you understand me? I mean, but don't walk up to me and say rubbish to me again. Don't. And she's like, wow, I'm so sorry. Please, I'm like, and like when she's like apologizing, and I just literally like look at her and hiss and walk away. And I remember texting like my friend that is also my flatmate, and I was telling her about it, and she's the one that likes to fight. She's like, "Oh, I wish I was there," and she's like, I would have said something else. Why? What's in fact? She has said this one that even responded today. Is even you even tried, but this response was too nice, and I'm like, but at least I responded, Abby, because I mean I haven't been responding in the last couple of months, so it was always just constant comments. I remember someone, the one that even I remembered like vividly, is somebody told me that that finally at least me too I can gain weight, so I will stop oppressing them.
I like that one. I
Bruh,
mean,
bruh.
I like it for the sake of what I was about to say, because I mean, yeah, you said something. It's I come to realize that when we talk about empathy, I think it's more like a mirror. I mean, there's negative empathy, definitely, and then there's the mirror of how us human beings see ourselves. You know, language was created to be vague. We wanted to be able to hide things from other people, other tribes, and the rest of it. So sometimes when we try to say things across to people, we are not thoughtful about how these things are coming across. And I mean, yeah, it's like I said, it's like we're like mirrors. We're mirroring each other. And
Yeah,
I think the reality I came to accept when things like this, because sometimes I might be training for something else. I mean, these things have happened to me. I might just be out. I'm just not in the mood to do anything. I mean, so I'm not doing nothing. I'm just there. And someone meets you outside and they're like, oh, what happened? You know, no muscles again. And I laugh. I'm training for something else. So, I mean, it's just funny. And so I had to create that mental framework in my head that, yeah, people mirror things. And sometimes they don't even know how to interpret what they are trying to ask. And the second thing is most of these mirrors, it's either admiration or envy, you know. I mean, these are two sides of the same coin. On the envy part, I want to look like this person. I want to be this person. And then you see this person is down one day and you're like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm better off. I mean, a lot of times beyond us, out of our control. I think most of it is within our own genes, you know. So you're like, okay, if this person can be this, like the comment this person makes, if this person can be this means I also can be this. And you forget that you have different journeys at some point, or
yeah,
you forget that even in trying to be empathetic, in trying to pass across a message like, look, I'm noticing what is going on with you. You forget to frame it as a question. So you make an assumption, like, and therefore it now shifts very quickly from what should have been a point of admiration or concern to a point of envy. You know, it's like
yeah,
seeing someone who has blisters and you know immediately like this person had a fever. And instead of asking it as a question like, you've been sick, what was going on with you? It comes off as what's into your mouth. And I mean, these are very, very simple things which come across wrongly a lot of times. And so yeah, it was part of the things that triggered, because I was like, okay, yeah, there's the difference between people being confident in themselves and having ego. And you've also always been a confident person. You came from somewhere, you got somewhere, and so if you could throw out some of this barrage, and that means there's something to be learned from this. So I think what I'm trying to say mostly is questions come off better than comments or like assumptions, because most of what you've been saying, they came off more as like comments. They're commenting on what they're saying. They're not asking questions about what they're saying. And it kills the entire point from where you might be coming from, even if you're trying to be empathetic or you're trying to point out something. But that's it's really interesting to hear these things. And I mean, in from what you've learned so far in this experience, how would you as well say people should interact when they come across things like this? Because I mean, this is the whole experience, and I'm sure a lot of other people have experienced these things.
Yeah. I think that people should be, like you said, empathy, right? People should be more empathetic towards like people that they admire, that they want to find out what's going on. Do you understand? And I know that not everybody actually cares. Do you get? Some people just want
It's
the
very
story
true.
behind, oh, what
Very true.
happened? Because they need to go and spread gist and be like, oh, did you hear? Do you
Like, did you
understand?
see
And then, I
or I
mean,
saw?
exactly. And for me, like even in, I mean, in the fact, I mean, if I'm being honest, there's been probably like 90% negativity, right? And the 10% that have been positive, like I've had people send me DMs and, Selema, what's going on with you? Like, are you okay? You've been like disappearing, you've not been online, or I saw you the other day, I said hi, but you didn't seem like you're in the mood. I remember someone texting me, like sending me a DM the other day, I'm like, I saw you outside and you looked really tired. And I was gonna come and say, oh hi, I follow you on Instagram and stuff, but I didn't want to interrupt your day because you didn't look like you wanted to be interrupted. And she goes, are you fine? And I'm like, thank you very much actually for asking. I'm like, no, I'm not. And I'm tired all the time, to be honest. And so yeah, that's probably why I looked like that. And I mean, I remember her just asking me what was going on, and we had like a whole conversation. And she's like, "Oh wow, that she didn't even know that like I was dealing with all of this. Like I never said anything." I'm like, I'm not typically the person who shares when something is going on with me. I'll probably share after I've come out from it, or maybe like after I've passed it like way back. Then I'll probably talk
True.
about it. And I
True.
think that this is the first time that, yeah, like I think I used to do with you. Like, I'm not even like the times where like I've like been in like places where my mental health was really bad and I was depressed. Like, I would never say that until I'm like fine. Do you get? I'm like, oh,
I mean, we
guy,
do these things to each other, so
guy,
I
no
know
vex.
what.
So now because you know. So like I mean for me like I think that this is the first time that I've actively spoken about something in the time that it's happening. Do you understand? Like it's just never something I do because I'm really private, right? And I don't like my business being out there like that, except this information that I volunteer. But if it's not information I volunteer, like it's just not something I want to talk about till I'm past it, right? And so, I mean, this entire thing is like the first time that I've spoken about something in the moment that it's happening, right? And I'm thankful for the people in my life, like people that are genuinely close to me, because I mean, there have been times where like my friend, like one of my male friends has called me and be like, guy, you go there all right, though. Like you survived this thing. Do you understand? It's like, you go there all right. No, not think I'm. You'll be fine. But you have to also understand that you need to give yourself time, right? And I understand that it's hard, especially because of what you do. And that, I mean, in the last 1 year, people have even questioned my expertise. Like, it's very odd. Do you understand? I had somebody message me. It's crazy. I'm like, it's been a very, like, intense. I had somebody send me a DM and wanted to, like, me to train her and stuff like that. And then she's like, oh, but that this one you gained weight, Sha.
Oh wow. Yeah. I mean,
And I mean, I've always like I've always had like a thick skin towards a lot of things. Like not very many things get to me. Do you understand? But then I think that the last 1 year has actually showed me that things can actually touch me, right? And there haven't been a lot that have affected me, but that one about trying to book me and like, oh, but do you understand? That one it hits me. Do you understand? Because it's like everything that I've worked for, all the things that I've been learning, like my certifications, everything was questioned in that one line of sentence. And it's
Because
like,
you're in a new body.
do you
You know.
understand? Because I'm in a new body like that. And it's like, if it's not, if I haven't like lived out this entire lifestyle and shown that it's possible, right? I will understand why you're skeptical, but like maybe just ask what happened. And for me, that's been the thing for me. Like maybe before you actually comment and say something stupid, maybe ask me what happened. Do you get? Because I'm my biggest critic. Like I am my biggest critic because I always expect like times 10 from myself, right? So when I'm below par, performing below what it is I want to, like I trust me that I'm giving myself a hard time already, right? So to have people now think that, oh, you're slipping up, um,
Pass judgment,
you're slipping up,
That's what
or
basically
I,
is.
I remember someone told me, Abi, did you start eating the junk food you say we should not eat? Okay,
But we eat junk food every now and then.
and it's just
Everybody's
like
susceptible
fair,
to it, so
fair.
it's
That's fair.
unfair to
No
pass
problem.
that
It's okay.
judgment.
So, but yeah, like it's the consistent assuming what is
Judgment,
not
yeah.
there. And I
Yeah,
remember
making
one time,
assumptions.
I remember snapping at somebody. Like somebody had made like a very stupid comment, and one day I said, "I'm like, no offense, so, but if we check the way that I eat, right, even at the state I am, you will never be able to eat that healthy. It's not insult, oh, it's not insult. It's just observation. Since we're both observing things." And the silence. The silence. And I'm like, no, because you just want to go around and observe stuff. Me self, I can make observation, you understand me? But yeah, I think that people should be more empathetic, right? And instead of judging and thinking that, oh, this is what happened, maybe just find out. And there's always this assumption that, okay, if you're really sick, then you should have lost weight. But like, not every sickness does that. Do you
Yeah,
understand? If
not
I
every
had
situation
PCOS,
makes for you
if I had
to gain.
PCOS in this time, I would have gained weight more than what I gained. Do you understand?
You know?
And I remember sitting my flatmate down, like, my friend, and I'm like, it's weird that for the last almost 1 year, I've been giving myself a really hard time and obsessing, right, about like the new body that I have to exist in. And then I checked and I'm like, I'm not, do you know, like that? And that's the maddest thing is that in all of this, I'm not even a size 14. I was saying, so wait, why am I now doing the most? Do you get? Because, and I was telling her, and I'm like, I think that it's because for a very long time I've been a certain size. I've looked a certain way, and it's never for me. It's never been about the size, but I've looked a certain way, right? Because of the way that
Yeah,
I train, I'm used to looking a certain way, and I'm like, and I told her, I'm like, if in all of this I had even lost my look and kept my performance, I'll be fine. I'm like, but I've lost on both sides. I've lost my performance. I've lost the way that I look, and so it's just like, what are we really doing? Do you understand? I mean, because if in all of this I can still run a kilometer in the time that I used to. I remember last year, because last year, before all of this got really bad, Ekanem was my coach, and we were training together. So Ekanem used to train me, and it's also like I reached out to him because so I began last year in a very bad place mentally, and I needed somebody to get me to work out, right? Because and I've never been in that place where even getting up to work out was a problem for me because I've always used fitness as sort of therapy, right? But it
yeah,
was so bad that I literally I did not want to do anything. Like, and so I reached out to him and I told him, oh, like I need to improve my running because my running sucked and all of that. And he's like, oh, okay. And I remember I kind of asking me, what's the real reason why you wanted me to train you? And I think the first 4 weeks I couldn't answer that question. And I told him, no, I just need somebody to push me. I need like stuff to be, I need to be challenged because I don't think I'm challenged enough. And he's like, okay. And he didn't say anything. And I think a couple of weeks passed, and I told him, I think I finally have an answer to your questions. And he's like, oh, I knew that the answer you gave me was not the answer. So, and then he's like, okay, so answer it. I'm like, I don't think that if I didn't have these sessions, if I didn't have you as my coach, I don't think that I would have worked out last year. So, and obviously this was before everything started, so I didn't even see what was coming, right? I'm like, but if I didn't have you as my coach, I don't think that I would have gotten up to work out. And I think that the fact that I even used to show up for those sessions, I don't like, I'm like literally like I used to look forward to our Friday sessions. Like I used to be excited the entire week to see you on Friday because it was the one time where I actually like somebody like, yeah, if you like, pass out. You understand? And I was telling him that if I didn't have those sessions to look forward to, I don't think that would have worked out last year. And somehow the being able to rebuild like some form of mental energy when I was training with him is literally probably what kept me when this whole thing started, right? And being able to like get to the place where because it's weird because I'd gotten to the place where I had I didn't remember why I used to work out.
Yeah,
I
you
had
mentioned that.
yeah, I think I said that
Yeah,
I
it
forgot
was. Yeah, it's
I
interesting.
forgot why I used to wake up and go work out. Like I forgot. And I've always had a why, right? It's never been about motivation for me, to be honest. Most of the time, everything that I do is it borders on like discipline, right? Even days where I literally get up and go because I always had a reason why I went to work out. And it was always for like just me basically remembering to center myself, right? But then I didn't remember why, and so I needed someone to remind me, right, for me to actually fall in love with fitness again, and that's basically what he did for me in that time, right? So when I got to the place where okay, I was, every like things were going really good, like my running time was insane, I was killing stuff, and then I just couldn't, right,
There was a
and
crash.
yeah, there was a crash. Like I tried, I just couldn't. Like every single time that I'll probably like maybe go and run, I was too tired. I could barely get out of bed most mornings. Like I had to drag myself a lot of times. I could barely get out of bed. And in all that time, like what I didn't realize is that this thing had been happening for a while, but I didn't notice till I think I noticed like the first going to try on my clothes and noticing that I've gained weight. Like something is wrong. Do you understand? So I really do feel that people should just ask what the problem is, right? If you really care or you're concerned, there's always a way for you to construct your sentence that changes your entire intention. You
True.
can say stuff like, the way you look now, wow. And someone else can literally be like, are you okay? Like, because I know that you're used to working out and you're really active. Did something happen? Do you want to talk about it? And it changes the entire intention of what it is the person is asking you, right? Because the second person makes you want to open up because, or maybe this person actually does care, right?
But it's
It's the
framed
same.
wrong.
It's framed
Framing is
wrongly. It's the
everything.
same way someone reached out to me and said, "Oh, please, can you recommend a therapist? Like someone that's my friend, please, can you like recommend a therapist for me?" And I could have just sent her the therapist, like, or I could have said, "This one you're looking for a therapist now. I be like all of us on the mad." Do you understand?
uh,
But like
I hear you.
my response
I hear
was,
you.
"Oh, okay." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I can send you someone's number." I'm like, "What city are you looking for?" And then when I was done asking her all those questions, I'm like, "Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? Is there something wrong?" And she's like, "Yeah, she actually wants to talk about it." And we ended up having like a 3 hour conversation about what the problem was. if I had said the first thing, obviously she would never have opened up or
Of course not.
told me
She won't even use your
exactly.
therapist any
Do
longer.
you understand? So just ask what's wrong and genuinely care, right? Because it's not about asking her, oh, why do you need a therapist so I can go and share the gist online? It's just what is really wrong with you. Like care enough about people's well-being to find out what the problem is, as opposed to projecting what it is that like people have projected so much in the last 1 year. It's like, oh, at least so if me I cannot do fitness, at least you now you have gained weight. So all of us are together.
And I mean, this thing applies to basically everything. It's
Mm-hmm.
not even just, I mean, in watching people, you know. I was sharing a conversation with a friend recently, and I was like, most people listen, but they don't hear, you know. And someone like feedback, I think I posted it somewhere. I was like, no, it's not listening instead of hearing. I'm like, hearing what someone is actually saying, those unsaid things, it's more like understanding where the person is coming from. So I think what I'll say is we've come to a place where people do not want to seek understanding of what the real problem is. They're just listening to every noise that comes around, you know. So it's like I'm talking, you're acting like you're hearing me, but you're just waiting to either react to what I'm saying, respond to what I'm saying, or have gist for the next person who you come across. So I can't even hear when something is going on. I mean, I've seen a lot of places online these days where I'm saying, oh, the person was so happy. We never knew that this person was going to act in this way, and we never knew this person was irrational. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, you're probably listening to everything. You're only seeing what you want to see. I mean, listening is like seeing what you want to see. You're not scratching the surface. You know, you're not trying to remove all those layers to actually understand what is going on. Um, People fail to look into other people's eyes, you know, because I still believe that the eyes are windows to the soul. For a lot of times, you come across a lot of people and they look happy, they act happy, but you look inside into their eyes and it's it's dead. You can literally see them suffering inside there, and um, I mean, we really don't care enough to really know what is going on inside people to understand what is really going on in their life. And it brings me to something which you may have said in passing, but you didn't know I picked it. And then we're evolving too slowly. Um, I think we get to some places where we okay, so let me start like this. I see a lot of things say communication. I mean, yeah, that's where I'm seeing this saying coming from with listening and hearing. So I see a lot of communication, and we have come to observe that when people talk about communicating what the problem is, what they think of is just listening. You know, they talking. They just want someone to talk. Oh yeah, communicate for a lot of people these days just comes across as talk about it, and we so from what I heard from you or what you mentioned, sometimes or in fact what we've said so far, sometimes I see communication as asking the right questions. You know, hearing, trying to really understand what is not being said, availing yourself without necessarily intruding. I mean, a lot of times we come to places in our lives where we know that these are battles we have to fight alone, regardless of who we hold dear to us. We know that this is the only thing we can. This we have to do this alone. I mean, no one else, regardless of how anybody would have cared about you, they can't carry that pain that you're feeling. You know, it still boils down to look, you have to get out of this in by yourself in the long run, and the most support anybody can offer you is ask the right questions, just present themselves without intruding, wait for when I'm ready to talk about it if I want to talk
Yeah.
about it, but there's communication going on, because communication, the main thing is interpreting what is being communicated, and it's not necessarily about speaking. It's more like hearing what is not being said. Like I said earlier, most of language, we invented it to just be vague. It's not necessarily how we still communicate. We still communicate with the bodily language mostly, and many people don't settle down to like look at that body language. So I think where I want to hear your perspective is on the marriage of communication. I know you like dragging people here. She has carried bottle of water, so let's all adjust. But, but yeah.
What's your question?
It's not necessarily a question. It's more your perspective on communication. I mean, this is not a question and answer. It's not an
So,
interview.
for me, right, communication it's a lot of things, to be honest, right? And I think that when people say communicate, I also like is that thing like when people say communicate, right? People want you to communicate, but they don't really want to hear anything that you're saying, right? So the request for communication comes from a selfish place for most people. It's not because they want to listen. It's not because they genuinely care about what you're about to say, right? It's just so when you now say that me, I don't used to say anything, you cannot accuse me of not wanting to communicate with you. That's basically what it is. Do you understand?
True.
So most people communicate from a selfish place. And I think I always say the thing, like even with clients that I coach, like for like my other like coaching business, you can't be a selfish communicator, right? Because the world doesn't revolve around you. And if you're going to ask somebody to communicate, then you have to be selfless in what you offer for them to communicate, right? So you tell somebody to communicate, but then you really don't want to hear what they want to say. And if they say anything that is outside of what you want to hear, then you have a problem with it. But you asked for communication. Do you understand? So you can't do that if you want genuine communication, right? If you want genuine communication, you have to be ready that this person is probably going to say stuff that I don't like, right? And they're going to say stuff that I'm probably not comfortable with. But if I'm asking somebody to communicate, they have to be honest and feel like there's a safe space for that communication to be like received. And
Over time, I've hated that word safe space. Once I hear safe space, I run. I'm not safe.
but like but at the end of the day, like that's the thing. You can't avoid the word safe space, you get, because some people create like the environment for you to be safe enough, right?
Yeah.
To communicate genuinely, right? And you know that in the way in which they try and communicate with you, or in the way in which they try and listen to you, there's never like a point where they insert themselves in places where they're not supposed to, right? Like there are people in my life that I know that I can call and have a conversation about something, right? And genuinely communicate what's in my head, and I will be listened to. And even if it's a stupid thing, when they finish listening to me, like my friend Ruth, when she finished listening, she's like, "Guy, you don't have sense. You don't have sense. I swear you don't have sense." And then when she telling that you don't have sense, like there'll be like proper like, okay, let's like table this and okay, what's going on here and let's do this and do that. Do you understand? But there are also people that I know that I would never call and do that with, right? Because hey, your own is even easy. You can say what happened to me.
I mean, we're all Nigerians, please. Well, as the joke goes, if you're going through something, go through it. Me too, I'm going through something.
So yeah, like I mean, not very many people understand communication, right? And I also think that that's why, like, even when it comes to like people like in relationships, I also think that it's one of the biggest reasons why relationships fail, right? Because you're with somebody, and instead of you to communicate what the problem is, you become passive aggressive. And I mean, you're not going to be passive aggressive with me, and then I'll continuously try to find out what's wrong. At some point, I'll leave you alone, you get, because why can't you just say what the problem is? And if I have to hound you consistently and you don't want to speak about it, then I'm not going to keep hounding you, right? Because that's just harassment at some point. And so we also have to understand that when it comes to communication, people receive things differently, right? So the way that I can receive, and I'm not going out again, is different from how you receive it. So let's say
True.
someone tells me, I'm not going out again. No, I probably received it that you said that this week like this, you will not leave the house. But maybe somebody else will hear it. I'm like, oh, he's not going out again today. Do you understand? So the
Yeah.
way in which people receive things when it comes to communication is also different, right? So that has to be considered when you communicate, that I can say one thing and you might not actually receive it in the way that I said it, right? So a lot of times when I'm probably speaking, like I said, do you understand a lot? Or or is there like, do you have questions for me? Or is there something that you want to clarify? Like, just so that I know that, okay, we're on the same page, right? And I ask, do you understand a lot? So that I can know if you don't understand what I'm saying, or if you didn't receive
You
it in
can
the way that
ask
I'm trying to.
questions.
Exactly. If you didn't receive it in the way that I've like communicated it from my head, right? If you tell me that you don't understand, I would ask, okay, so what don't you understand? What do you want me to explain? Do you understand? So we're on the same page with what I delivered and what you've received. In that way, we've communicated, right? But if you don't understand something and then you run with it and take it that this is what I said, when I might not have actually, like, you probably heard it differently, then that's problematic. And I've seen people who have done that, taking something that you've said and probably maybe not understanding it in the way that maybe you said it and interpreting it differently, running with it and getting upset for it, and never asking you at any point, is this what you meant? Another thing that you have to understand is, depending on who this communication is with, there's always intent behind what is communicated, right? And for me, like, I always lay it out in my head, does this person hate me? Would they willfully try to hurt me, right? And are they saying this thing so that I can actually get upset, right? Those are always like the three things that I consider first, especially when it's like people that I'm friends with or people that I talk to, or even when I date somebody, right? And when I ask these three things, then I can focus on, okay, so maybe the way it was delivered is the problem, but the intention behind the delivery might not be what I'm saying, right? So I probably say that, okay, this thing that you said, me, I did not like it too, because as well, you could have communicated it differently, right? And it's also that thing where you now find out that people are different with taking corrections when it comes to communication. There are people who hate being corrected about communication, and there are people who understand how to take correction when when they're like corrected about communication. So on one hand, there's the person who, okay, this thing you said, like, I understand what you were trying to say, but like I feel like you have communicated it differently. And then you have that person asking you, so you want to tell me how to talk now? Why are you angry? What happened? What is the issue?
People,
What
people should
happened?
come
Who
and meet
died?
Selema because I don't understand.
And then on the other hand, there are people who would ask you, okay, so how should I have communicated it, right? How could I have communicated it differently that it didn't come across like as if I was trying to harm you, right? The first person will end up having issues because I said this thing you said, you could have said it differently, because you cannot always be right. You now come and be fighting me and be, you want to tell me how to talk now? Eh? Sorry. Don't be angry. But yeah. So
you
yeah, I
know,
mean, yeah, I'm listening.
finish. I mean, like, when I think it's like I coined this thing sometime into true phrases when I hear people talk about communication. I tell them, look, communication is not actually the problem. We communicate every time in different ways, even in silence we're communicating. So
Mm-hmm.
I think how I say it is, communication might be the key, but how people perceive what is being communicated, that's the lock. And then
Yeah.
interpretation is the whole big door. Because I mean, I could pass the message across in silence, in words, and how you interpret it is how you've perceived something. Like what you pointed out, you have to ask yourself if this person has intent, the intent of this person, why the message coming across, who the messenger is. So I mean that's perception of how these things come across.
It's like
Otherwise,
it's
then
like it's like that thing of being with someone who sometimes has like silent moments, right? And
you know.
doesn't speak all the time. Do you get? And if you don't ask for, okay, when you're, and if you don't ask when you're silent, what does it mean? Like, am I in your space? Do you want me to get out? Do you want me to not speak to you? Are you going through something? If you don't ask, that silence will be interpreted, like you interpret the silence in, oh, I probably annoyed him. He doesn't want to talk to me again. Or this one that is giving silence, silence, silence. Maybe he just wants me to get up and be going to my house. So
And
then,
I just want to think. I mean, my head
but
might just be
I just
thinking of
want think.
something.
I just want
And
think. It has nothing
it's
to
not
do with
about you. And
you.
it's something key what you said about selfish communication, because yeah, it's nothing to do with you. You know, I think even before I want to comment on this, I want to push something across how how we look at competition. I mean, I made mention of this. That was the first time I decided to do something on the video, and I was like, so I think it came from where you talked about how you adjusted into your new body. There's something like that occurred with me at some point in life where I started noticing that, look, things are changing. You know, all this flying up and down that you're doing, it's
Baba, you don't know before they calm down.
things are changing. It's not how it happened one day, and I mean, it gave me an entirely new perception of competition with ourselves. I mean, one of my mentors communicated and was like, "Oh, there's healthy competition." I'm like, "Look, I think I take words very literally these days, because I mean, words are magic. We're passing across something. Something is happening every time we're saying something." So I started looking at what competition really is, and started asking myself, like, I mean, why do I need to compete even against my own self? Point where I know that I have multiple selves that come across. One of them had the strength to do certain things. It can fly 6 inches. But in doing that, it's building an experience. And one of them has become older. And when it has come to this place where it has become older, it now just has the experience. But it doesn't have the strength this other guy has. So if I'm trying to compete with that other old guy in this same state, my guy, my teeth would have ended everywhere. So at some point, instead of pushing to be compete with myself at every time, but I start seeing points where we need to start collaborating more with all ourselves. You know, it's I think it's key to adaptation, and this
Yeah.
stems out into a lot of other things. I mean, now we're branching out slowly into how we can communicate, into interact in our relationships, because when we talk about this, about communication, interpretation, most of it comes from that place of competition. We get into what is meant to be partnerships, and we're still competing. You're competing with yourself, you're competing with your partner. You want to center everything about on how you feel at the present moment. And I think feelings are subjective, you know. Emotions are very objective, but how I feel at a particular moment, it's subject to me. Another person may feel how I am feeling at a particular moment, except I pass across that message of, okay, this is how the interpretation of this present reality is fitting into, I'm feeling this, the emotions I'm coming across with this. Um, 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 with this silence, for example, is there a reason for this? And I mean, I'm centering myself now on the seat as someone who also enjoys my quiet moments, and and sometimes, I mean, it's wired into my head, like, if you don't keep improving yourself, you can't give. And for this reason, there are certain things, like even in fitness and in training, there are certain things which have become wired into you as principles, as disciplines, as things you value. and you come into contact with other people who okay, yeah, the first thing I think I'll go from here, because people value different things. So we come into different experiences with people who may have different values for different things. I think the first error in creating relationships is at the initial point, at that point where it's still biology that is still pushing people, they fail to lay down their values of different things. And I think it's our personal responsibility for a lot of these things, because if you draw people, if you draw people into your space who have different kinds of values, it's more on your responsibility. It tells more about your own values. So yeah, the point I'm trying to make and where I'm trying to hear from you is on that beginning part. You know, you're passing across a message like, I value learning, I value openness, I value freedom in certain things, I value how we pass across messages. If most times I shut down and I'm inside my own head, it's not about you. It's I mean, if you ask the question if you've offended me, and I say no, I mean I've seen these things repeated a lot of times in our digital reality, where it's like, oh, I'm asking you questions of why you're quiet and you're not communicating, but the person is communicating. I mean, I think even a few people who I have tried to talk about this in their reality of relationships, I'm like, look, you ask the question, is there a problem? And you're hearing, no, there's no problem. Okay, so why are you quiet? Is there something you want to talk about? Maybe there's something. I'm not ready to talk about it. This is my demon. This is what I'm about to fight. And I know I need to go through this alone. I understand that we are partners. But in partnerships, we tend to want to dissolve the entirety of personal authenticity, you know, in places or situations where I know that the worst thing or the best thing you can do for me at this point, in this experience I'm going through, in this phase, is just be silent in your support. I mean, you don't even necessarily need to know what this is. When I'm ready to talk about it, I'll pass it across. Maybe it's something I need to go through. So it still boils down to the opening of relationship. What is that thing? Is it necessarily that we are blinded by biology in the beginning, or we just want to lie? Sorry, that felt good.
Okay. So first of all, the thing is, this thing you said now, this thing you asked me, the answer is much. Okay. So the thing is, a lot of people are not self-aware enough to be in relationships. Let's just be honest first. There's so many people who are in relationships that they should not be in, because when you don't possess self-awareness, when you don't know yourself enough, right, there's no way that you're going to be willing to understand someone else, right? And then
True.
now comes the part where you center yourself a lot, and so everything has to revolve around you, right?
Main character
And
syndrome.
guy, main character syndrome. And then because you're not self-aware enough and you don't understand who you are and the intricacies of your individuality, right? There's no way that you're going to understand someone else's. Do you understand? Then there's the fact that because that thing, self-awareness, is lacking, right? You now think that everything has to be about you. And the way that this person is acting has to be about you. And the way that this person is doing so has to be about you. But then I think that our generation, right, is forgetting that relationships are about two different people that are coming from two different places, from two different backgrounds, with two different issues, right? Coming together and saying, look, I like you enough to want to make this work. I like you enough for you to want to be in my life, and I'm going to make the effort, right? There's no understanding that that's actually what a partnership should look like. And there's this thing about there's this thing someone and like someone I dated that what we said is you define what commitment is to you. Do you get? The general idea of commitment is okay, we're together, we're not seeing anybody else, we're fully here, great, we're exclusive. That's it. That is understood, right? But the general happening of that commitment should be specific to you and your partner.
True.
So if let's say there are people who every single time they want to be with each other, they want to see each other every day, they have to spend time together all the time, it doesn't mean that that's what your commitment has to look like. For
True.
example, I like my space. Like I keep saying this thing, I'm saying this thing where I think that the amount of ways in which I like being alone needs to be studied. I don't like I think I've even crossed the threshold. I've crossed the threshold for normal spending time with yourself. Do you understand? Like it have go up. And
And a lot of
so
people don't like spending time with themselves at all. They're afraid of themselves. So
so
how
the
do you
fact that
want to
I'm
know
I'm
yourself
aware
when you're afraid of yourself?
I'm aware enough that I understand that part of me, right? If I'm with somebody who consistently needs to see me, I will be suffocating. If I'm with someone who cannot understand that I don't hate you, oh, I actually really love you. But guys, sometimes I just want to sit down for the four walls of my room, they look warm. I promise there's nothing wrong with me. If I'm with someone who cannot understand that, I would suffocate because I need to now bend to fit into them wanting to see me all the time. But I'm not genuinely present. I'm just there because this is what you want. And because you cannot understand that part of my personality requires that I really don't want to see you all the time. I mean, I'm fine if I see you maybe 2, 3 times a week. We're good. We're not quarreling. We're okay. And in those times I'm seeing you, there are times where I want to sit in silence. There's nothing wrong. I just want to be alone with your presence. Do you understand? Like, I want to be alone, but I want you to be there, right? Breathing the same air that I am, but we don't have to speak. And if you're somebody who values stuff like this, you can't be with somebody who does not understand why you need to be silent, or somebody who is now going to take that silence and revolve it around them because you will run mad. Because it's like, boss, why are we fighting? Why are we fighting about this thing that doesn't require fight now? Please, no. Do you understand?
I'll
And
run away before I run mad, I beg.
and so like
I not pursue my mother.
like there's that thing of like not understanding yourself enough before you now go and be in a relationship, and then going into a relationship and expecting that. And there's like is wild, right? Because of like the fact that like I coach like people like when it comes to relationships and stuff like that. It's mad when you see that there are so many people who expect that your individuality just dies because you decided to be with them, who think that whoever it is that you are will bend to fit what they want, right? And as I've gone on like over the years, I don't exactly blame people like that, because when you exist in a world where there are very few people who know who they are, who are able to stand their ground in who they are, and who understand the difference between these things are things that I can't compromise about because they affect my general well-being, right? And these things are things that I can compromise because they don't affect my general well-being. People who don't know the difference between these two things would walk around being in relationships with people where they're always compromising things that they shouldn't be compromising and bending to fit whatever it is that their partner requests. So when that kind of person goes on to meet someone who is very certain in who they are, who understands the difference between this is a compromise and this is you asking me to act out of myself. When they meet somebody like that, they are not able to reconcile the fact that this person is not going to compromise things that they shouldn't be compromising just so that they can be with me. They don't understand the difference between those two things, right? And so there will now be friction between those two people because you are there and you're self-aware enough to know the difference between the two things, and the other person does not understand because he's never been with anybody who is aware enough to know that there's a difference, right? So he's constantly fighting you to bend on the things that you shouldn't be bending on because that's what he's used to. Do you get? So if you're going to go into a relationship, obviously you have to communicate and this is what I can do and this is what I cannot do, right? But then you can't do that if you don't even know who you are. That's one. Two, there's also this thing where I don't know if it's a Nigerian thing, but there's also this thing where people typically expect that when you communicate certain things, that this is like this is what I can do, this is what I cannot do, this is one you cannot catch me inside. They tend to think that just because you end up being with them, you will bend to fit what they want.
It's a
So they
control
date
thing. It's,
you
it's
with
a
the
human
hopes,
thing.
yeah. So they
It's not a
okay, so
Nigerian
that's a
thing. It's a
human thing.
human
So they
thing.
date you with
Yeah,
the hopes that
it's a control thing.
oh, when this one like me, when time pass, I go do and then you end up dating you and they realize that this person is not doing it. So
You don't like me enough. That is why.
you get Bob. You don't like me enough, man. And I remember telling somebody this thing. I'm like, no, I really like you. But then I don't see a situation where I bend to fit what you want and not be able to recognize who I am. I'm like, I've like in my younger like years, right? When I was like early 20s or teenage years, I've been that person who has bent to fit what other people thought I needed to be, right? I've
Not
bent
me.
into what people expected me to be. I'm like,
I've been a
and then
regular
like
dissident.
and I came like in growing and understanding myself and becoming like as self-aware I am that I am now. I would never be that person again. Do you understand? I'm like, because the only thing I remember in all of those times is my unhappiness. I'm like, I may be selfish that I want to be happy while I'm with you, but I'm not going to give that up because you expect me to be something else. That's not something I would do, right? And if you have a problem with the fact that not I'm selfish to the point where I still understand that I need to be happy as an individual, right? Even though I'm with you, then I can't, this is not something I should be doing. Do you
But if I'm
understand?
not
Because
happy, how can I give you happiness? Or how can we be happy?
people don't get that, and
You
that's
know?
another thing. It's like people expect that relationships are supposed to make you happy, but nobody is responsible for your happiness. Like
Yeah, I
if
mean
you're not
that's
showing up
that's renting out your happiness to someone else, and I think that's
exactly,
what's
I'm making someone else's
yeah,
responsibility for you to, but that's not anybody's responsibility but yours, right?
yeah,
And
true.
so if that's not understood, then you have people walking around trying to get in partnerships because they're searching for their happiness. When the ideal thing is that we're both supposed to show up, understanding what our happiness is, being able to be happy without each other, and then deciding that we're going to merge both, right? And then find a middle ground that we're both comfortable in and happy in because we both know
True.
what happiness looks like without each other. So like
Yes.
if you don't know who you are and these things are not things that you've defined or come to understand, then you constantly like go into relationships like seeking, oh, this person needs to become so that I can be comfortable, and forgetting the fact that everybody is different, right? It's also that thing where I think I made a thread about it like I think a week ago or so on Twitter where I said, go to therapy before you marry anybody's child. Like go to therapy if you're deciding that you want to be in like a serious partnership. Do you understand? Because at the end of the day, especially I think like a lot of us, not even just Nigerians, are walking around undiagnosed with ADHD or like we're walking around undiagnosed with a lot of shit. You get, and all of these things that are undiagnosed play a large part in the way that we connect with human beings, with some of our characteristics when we're in relationships, right? And then maybe you don't know that you're neurodivergent, and then you now go and date somebody, right? And the person is now there thinking that this one when the person know they follow me talk sometimes, it's like they hate me. And you know that I don't really hate you. I just have stuff I'm going through mentally. You get like sometimes my mental health it do break down, it do skip. You understand me? So like it's important that you know what it is this person is coming to the table with and what it is you are coming to the table with, right? And know that this is where I can find middle ground. And in this other one, I can't do it. I can't do it. And if that's not something that we can like walk around, or something that we can learn to live with, then just don't do the relationship. Because don't expect that. It's like that thing where people, how you hear things like, oh, when we met she said that she didn't want, 4 children, but she ended up having 4 children because she loved me. No, boss. That's Then you now take that and now project it on everybody else and be like, if the person wants to marry, say they want 4 children, or they don't want 4 children, don't worry, they'll do it because they love you. There's that expectation. Do you understand? And so people now, you now hear like a lot of Nigerian men hitting you with, and so if you say you want only one child and I say I want three, so you want to tell me you can't have those two because you love me. When it's not spaghetti we're buying, it's children, like full human beings. What are we doing? Like, how? Like, children are
I'm,
supposed to be conscious decisions that you make because, oh, I actually want this person, like this life. I want to contribute to this life. I want to raise this life, not because, oh, this person said they want three, so let me give three. It doesn't make
I
any
mean,
sense.
yeah, I've been trying as much as possible to keep it within people before you say, well, that we're dragging other people. But I mean, I hear you, and so it's two things that I want to walk around. The first part, yeah, it's not a Nigerian thing. It's a human psychology thing. I
Yeah.
think it's power. You see, for as much as a lot of us try to run from it, um, and I think it's that running from it that makes people very unaware of how much we crave certain things without even knowing that we crave them, because they're in our biology. It's wired into our animal brain, that lizard reptile brain that seeks competition. I think that's why I brought during that competition thing earlier, that seeks competition, that seeks power, that seeks to be powerful over anyone. I mean, humans have these things wired into their psyche. We're always craving to be above someone else, and you've witnessed these things in the place where we talked about admiration and envy being the same side of different sides of the same coin. So it's not necessarily a Nigerian thing. For a lot of people, it's more like a power thing, and it's more prevalent in cultures where people start with I. I mean, that's that self. It's more an I thing than a we thing. I mean, there are places where I should future and where we should future, but in a lot of cultures where you see, in fact, let's even move down to our Nigerian place. I mean, too much of the culture which is around us is be self-centered. It's not even selfish. It's just be self-centered and just for yourself. Live for yourself. Everything you're doing is basically for yourself, you know. And I think the second thing is when I was discussing with Ekanem and I talked about learned helplessness, and people try, and a lot of the narratives trying to push people into learned helplessness, like, oh, you don't want to bring yourself to do the work. A lot of people run from, I'm trying not to run, drawing genders, but the truth is, and I've come to realize in my experiences, that a lot of people run from self-improvement. They want to be same. And on one hand, when they're running from self-improvement, they then don't catch up when the person who they are close to, or the people who they are close to, is improving themselves. So you stay static. I'm increasing my vibrations because I know that I wasn't born to stay in one place, and I'm born to evolve. I'm creating my evolution myself, and you choose to remain static. And at every point, you're trying to pull me down back to that static place. Like, oh, yeah, this is how I used to be before. Why are you no longer like this again? And I mean, like, look, I'm built to evolve. Why are you not evolving? I think there's that art where someone came and like, you've changed, and they're looking at the other person blooming with trees and trying. Yeah, I know that this is what it's supposed to be. I'm meant to keep evolving at every point. So, from my perspective, I don't even see it as people needing to go for therapy. They need to be able to sit down for 30 minutes by yourself a day, like, hear yourself, hear those things going on inside your own head. And the reason I say is even in the therapy, a lot of people lie to therapists. They lie because they don't even know who they are. So you give the person who is listening to you more work to try to draw things from you because you've shielded yourself. You've put yourself inside this big fortress of your own lies, and you don't want to accept your own lies. You don't want to even look into what it is that is really true. Okay, yeah, these are places I actually need to improve on in the long run. These are the places that this thing doesn't work for me again. You know, I don't believe the human mind or the human being is just one person at every point in time. We're several people at one point in time. That piece of the peace that we're seeking from our mind is because the mind is always at too many places at different times. So even if you need to like get that peace, you actually need to come and sit down with all of them together. Okay, we've come to the round table. How far? Let's run this debate. And the thing I find with sitting down quietly a lot of times is you hear a lot of things. And when you allow these guys go through all their monkey chattering, at the end of the day, they come to a consensus, you know, like, yeah, okay, at this point in time, after all these things we've all come through, ladies and gentlemen, Nigerian chairman, chair ladies, as we Nigerians do it, this is who we are at this point. So if we want to get to this other place, you need to take the back seat, you know. I mean, I'm trying to run through the analogy of it being like a story because this is how it happens in our heads. And it's mindfulness, it's true, it's that self-awareness to know that at this point, what is needed, what is no longer needed. And not try to like chase after every running thing, you know. So I just see that too many people are both not aware. Too many of us are just not seeking that. We don't want to improve. We just want day a day. And for a lot of people, the term is take me as I am. Let me leave this one on your table. if you love me, take me as I am. You know, that's why I'm going to leave you on your table because I know this way you're going to drag them. I saw one thread you made about it. I kept quiet. She's laughing. So I mean, like that point of evolving. It comes with that self-awareness, but really should it's okay. So I mean, like on your perspective, it's something I did like to hear about. You know, take me as I am, or we have to keep. I don't know why that keeps coming to my head, but we have to keep evolving. We can't be here forever. Where people tomorrow because something is literally we are adapting to times. So yeah, that's the perspective I want to hear from you. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
No, I guess that's the perspective I want to hear from you because I see a lot of those narratives everywhere, like as if people are meant to be everywhere. I think the next thing I want to point about is, and I want to hear from you. Yeah, I heard something about compound fights. In fact, every time I hear the word fight, I run from the person these days. I don't want to hear the word. And I've seen a lot of these things pop up. So this is like a whole match. And like I said, this is a conversation. It's not an interview. So it might not end as questions every time I talk. So I've been seeing a whole margin of fights and kindness in the same place. And recently when I shared something about it, I mean, some people were like, yeah, you should still be able to be. And I'm like, look, my I think the first real awareness I had about fighting was on the karate mat. I mean, we look at conflicts on a very, very tiny spectrum. You know, it boils down to fighting I think that is like the lowest form of conflict you can engage in, because conflict is like a very wide spectrum of things. There's dating spectrum, there are differences, I mean, that need to be addressed. But for a lot of times, and for a lot of people, the idea that everything, it has to be fights. I mean, like, yeah, like it just has to be fights. If we're not fighting, we've not started something. So we're drawing chaos into stuff because fighting is part of it. But yeah, let me hear yours.
So I think that the problem isn't if you fight. The issue is how, right? Yeah, there's no way that you're going to exist in any kind of interaction, platonic, romantic, whatever, official. There's no way you're going to exist with other human beings that there isn't going to be some form of conflict or friction, right? And then when it comes to like romantic partners, and let's say you end up being married or living with this person, there's no way you're not going to fight. Do you understand? The problem isn't if you fight, it's in how you fight, right? And a lot of people pick up their fighting styles in the way in which they grew up, right? So let's say somebody grew up in a house where they're always shouting at each other. When that person wants to fight with you, the entire neighborhood will hear that people are fighting because they feel like if they are not screaming down the house, their point is not getting across. But like, just because you're loud doesn't mean that you're making any sense. You can literally reduce your tone and talk the way that we're speaking now and still make more sense than you would if you were screaming down this house, right? So the thing isn't in if you fight, it's mostly how you do it. And I think that because there's a lot of what do you call it, aggression when it comes to like the way that Nigerians are as a whole. Everything is so bloody aggressive, it's like, boss, why are you shouting? Like, what really happened? You get like, I understand that you're upset, but like, why you did shout? Like, you can still express the point that you're expressing without screaming at me. Like, I can hear you. I'm not deaf. Do you understand me? So, I do think that the problem is mostly always about how you fight, and I think that people also see conflict as if we're not like maybe shouting at each other or calling each other names, then that's not conflict, right? And I don't think that there's like you said, there are different like facets to conflict, right? And people don't also understand that there's conflict where we can sit down and have like a proper like debate about why we feel that each of us are wrong about something, right? That's conflict. Nobody is screaming. Everybody is expressing their point and trying to hear the other person and trying to, okay, this is where I'm coming from so that you can understand me. And I get that this is like a touchy place for us. But I mean, the only way that we're going to get through that kind of conflict is if we have a conversation about it, right? And I think that it's important that if you're going to go out and let's say be with anybody or like you have to understand how it is that you fight, right? And then have a conversation about like what the person considers as conflict and what conflict needs to look like and where they're coming from, what conflict looks like where they're coming from, right? Because they can be used to the consistent shouting, or if they need to express their point or they're angry, they need to scream. And maybe you are like used to coming from a home where your parents probably don't shout, right? It's not as if they don't get upset, but they probably don't shout. And maybe conflict and fighting within themselves and even with like their children is always okay. This thing you have done now is very stupid. It's a stupid thing. You get, you are behaving like a stupid person, and maybe they've learned how to talk through those types of things, right? You will notice that if these two separate people from these two separate houses come together and decide to date, the way that they fight will have issues. Like the conflict resolution will be, it will have, like, there'll be a lot of friction, right? Because on one hand you have somebody who believes that don't shout. Do you understand? Like, I can hear you, you can be angry, but I feel like this anger can be expressed without you shouting at me. And then on the other hand is the other person who comes from a place where we dey shout for my house. Nobody don't die from shouting, so I go shout. So it's like the person cannot understand why you're saying you don't want to be shouted at, and you can understand why the person is shouting, right? So at the end of the day, there's friction in that way in which you guys resolve conflict, right? Because you are probably used to resolving conflict in a very different way than they are. Do you understand? So for me, I don't think that it's that you're not going to have issues. It's in how you have issues that, like, that changes everything basically, and in how
So,
you're able to resolve those issues, right? I remember someone saying how that, so someone I know that used to be married said that one of the things that he feels like his ex-wife did not understand was once you shout at him, he's mentally shut down. Like, whatever it is that you're expressing in those times where you're screaming, he actually does not hear you. So when the shouting is done and you don't feel the need to actually like speak properly and, okay, this is what I'm dissatisfied with and this is what you've done to me, that he just goes on and continues doing it. Because to him it didn't register that you've complained about something because you were shouting. And he was saying how that for him when the shouting begins, it's like his brain like has a switch where he just tunes off. And it's like you're screaming and making a lot of noise but he can't hear you. And he's like, one of the biggest things for him was that um, not understanding how to communicate that without coming from a place where he was also angry, right? And even when he did communicate it in times where they were fine, she always saw it as a, I'm going to shout when I want to shout. And if you don't like the shouting, then don't be acting the way you're acting. Is that, but I'm telling you that you can tell me this thing without screaming at me and I will hear you, right? Because I will function more if I really understand what you're saying so I can stop doing what you're doing, what you're complaining that I'm doing. And so eventually, I mean, they ended up getting divorced, right? And when we're having a conversation, we're just talking about it. He's like, that for him, that was one of the biggest things. Because even in situations where it's like really important decisions where they needed to make, or maybe she asked him to do something and he ended up doing it in the wrong way that she didn't want, the correction was never from a place of, oh, you've done this thing, I don't like it, maybe you could have done it differently. It was a scream. That so sometimes he would avoid going home just so that he won't be screamed at. And that even when he did sit down at some point to try and communicate it, she did not understand why he did not like being shouted at. Because to her, shouting is how she gets her point across. But to him, it wasn't, right? So it's not if you're going to argue or have conflict or debate during conflict, it's mostly in the how you do it. And if you're with somebody who says, I don't like so, or the way in which you present your point or something is kind of off and it rubs me the wrong way, that's something that you can do better with, right? That's something that you can learn to adjust. That's not something that if you were to compromise on it to change anything about who you are, right? The person is not asking you to shape shift or bend into someone else. They're just asking you to treat them better. And I think that if you're going to be with somebody, that's worth making adjustments for, right? Because like that thing I said earlier on, where it's not a compromise that is going to shift the very core of who you are. And I think that that's the thing of understanding the difference, that there are compromises who that will affect the core of who you are, right? And change you into a least happier state of yourself. And then there are adjustments and compromises that you make in partnerships and relationships that they are for the betterment of who you are as a person generally and what that relationship looks like generally, right? Those compromises
mm,
are the ones that are worth making. But then compromises that have to have you bending in order to break for this person to be happy. Those are compromises that that like they're problematic for you in the long run, because eventually what will happen is, and that's the thing that like I typically always think that people don't typically realize, is that eventually the longer a partnership like lasts, right, the more your individuality starts to play out. So whoever it is that you suppress for somebody, just because, oh, maybe, and it's not, it's that thing where yeah, you're not compromising, you're suppressing who you are, right, just to
in the
keep them
beginning,
happy.
yeah.
Whoever it is you suppress for someone else, that person that is suppressed will
Will
eventually
come.
come to the surface. It happens all the time. Like, you cannot suppress a version of you for a long time. Like, no matter who it is you suppress to keep someone else happy, as time goes on, that person that you are that they did not like, that you needed to suppress, will come to the surface. And what happens when that happens? Do you understand? Because this person
I
doesn't
don't
like
know
that
who this
version of you.
person is.
So when your individuality starts to shine through, when you've been like in a partnership that is long term, when your individuality starts to shine through and that person you've been suppressing starts to come to the surface, how do they intend to deal with that person? Like, are they now going to say, okay, I can't do this anymore because you're giving me a version of you that I don't really like, or a version that I'm uncomfortable with, and I told you I needed this person to disappear? You can't disappear yourself for too long, because the suppression of self always leads to you erupting, right? But then you can learn to exist in a place where this person is understanding of that version and you're understanding of that version, and then there's middle ground. So you don't have to suppress who that person is. There's learning to live with what the person, like what the version of them that you don't like exhibits, right? And finding the middle ground of that, because in the long term, and that's, I think, another thing that we don't often consider, is that in the long term of asking for suppression of your partner, it eventually ends up being what ends the relationship. Do you understand? Because the person will now get to the place of, oh man, I know they do again. I've tried.
You know, at the point where I mentioned it, and I mean, where I look at the whole spectrum of conflicts, I mean, I picked most of it on the mat. And one of the models that you're taught in martial arts is mostly conflict resolution. And the first thing everybody learns in martial arts is how to run. I mean, most times when people like, that means you can fight. And I'm like, look, I know how to run. And I will, I run from things which are going to create problems. And I mean, so when I started trying to run into this, and why I focus more on fighting is, in fights, our rational self shut down. You know, that framing that this is a fight, I want to win. It's natural in every human being. And then you mentioned something as well, which is really very important, which is debate. And I mean, debate is very, very key into conflict, because once I approach conflict, like, okay, yeah, fine, we're actually just having a debate. We can go back and forth, look for the nuances inside all these places. And inside that nuance, there's truth. But at the point where there's a frame of fight, I've observed that rational thinking, it just shuts down entirely. And javelins that are drawn out, and I mean, if you don't bring me down, and bring you down, and this that but it's true, you know. Fighting, conflict is a natural constitution for us human beings. We can never run from it, even with ourselves. I mean, we go through these things, and with other people as well, is, you know, we go through these things. Then I start coming across a lot of fight. I'm like, do you guys know how damaging framing conflict into just fight is? And I mean, some people were like trying to say I'm taking the word literally, and I'm like, yeah, you should actually take that word literally, because the moment I frame my head, I'm in a fight. It's like looking at two arboros on the street. They've gone from the first level of where conflict starts from, where it's debate, and then it's I mean, so how these things metamorphose is basically it starts from the first place where we're addressing the issue, and after instead of addressing the issue, we leave issue that is really the issue, and we've gone to the person and we'll tell you exactly how you yourself as a person is, and then from there it cascades down all the way to where it becomes fighting, and then we forget the entire problem. Like the issue is no longer the focus anymore. It's me and you. We are now, we have to choke each other. this is where we have to strangle ourselves, and a lot of these things came, I mean, on the mat and in resolving fine. Whereas the issue is the issue the person, or is the issue a decision the person has made? Because I mean, we are not infallible to wrong decisions. A lot of times people are bound to make decisions which are going to sit well with you, and they might not come with it from the intention of trying to be hurtful. It's just a bad decision, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that was the part I was trying to put across. We've done 2 hours. It's 15 minutes, and I mean, it gets like this sometimes.
You have made me talk today. God.
Yeah, I'm happy.
My water has even finished.
I'm happy. Digest the wickedness. Water. Thank you. Let me not draw off your time. But yeah, thank you so much, and I'm very sure
You're welcome. Can you hear me?
learned from this. Yes, clearly I can.
Hello.
I can hear you. Okay, yeah, your network is a bit faulty. Wow. I mean, they could as well just. Yeah, okay. I think, are you back? Are you still here? You're back. You give us permission to end properly. Get that out of us. Well, thank you everyone for joining in. It was a marvelous day. I think this has been the longest so far. It was very enjoyable. She's still trying to, I think her network is still booting, but we really thank you for listening. So I'm going to try again. But yeah, it has been really interesting, and we thank you so. Selema, in one sentence, any last words, like something we should learn from, something we should hear? The philosophy.
Don't do drugs.
My God. All right, fine. So the kids don't do drugs. it's bad for your health, and I mean, there's sometimes the drug epidemic.
So bloody unrelated, man.
But yeah, it's key, because I mean, maybe a lot of things that people are reacting to including drugs. I mean, and drugs come in different forms, including content drugs, especially content drugs. Stop digesting nonsense.
Don't do drugs.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, thank you. I think this was a good conversation.
It was.
And you see, I'm hungry because you have taken a lot from me.
We'll talk about this in the DM.
So I need you to collect my address and send me food. Thanks and God bless.
You're welcome. Okay,
But yeah, thank you. This was a good conversation.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed this. Thank you. I mean, until next time, everybody. The video will be posted as usual. If you missed out on it, or you want to follow up, I'm going to post through or at least share how you're going to catch the full conversation. Thank you for joining in. Have a lovely afternoon. Goodbye from Thought to Thoughts, and share love together. Cheers.
Bye.